In B2B marketing, individual leads or MQLs no longer tell the whole story. Today's buying decisions are made by groups of stakeholders, each with their own priorities, timelines, and channels of influence. Traditional lead-based funnels struggle to reflect the complexity, and account-level ABM strategies alone aren't enough. As a result, many organizations are rethinking their approach, moving towards more precise, multi-threaded, and data-driven engagement strategies that center around buying groups, not just accounts or individuals. But this evolution brings its own set of challenges, aligning sales and marketing around the same goals, restructuring tech stacks, and adapting to a world where relevant personalization and timing are everything. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Revenue Lounge podcast. I'm your host, Randy Likas, and in this episode, we'll explore how account-based marketing is evolving in response to this shift, how buying groups are reshaping go-to-market strategies, and what it takes to operationalize this change at scale. And joining me today is Leslie Alore. Leslie is the Senior Vice President of Marketing at Flexera. Her remit is to shape Flexera's brand, perception, and help drive recurring revenue growth that create amazing customer experiences. Leslie, so glad to have you joining me today. Thanks so much for being part of the episode.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I usually like to start these episodes asking a little bit about your background. So maybe you can walk us through your career journey, what your current role is at Flexera that I didn't cover off on in the introduction.
Sure. So I actually started my journey in life in university going to engineering school. And I realized quite quickly I did not love being an engineer, but I did love solving complex problems and really appreciated the systems thinking side of things. And I got lucky enough to stumble into a marketing internship, but they wanted an engineer because what they wanted to do was they wanted to implement Eloqua and Salesforce. They had actually been mandated by their recently come in parent company to bring that in, and really nobody in marketing wanted to take that on. At that time, Eloqua required a pretty heavy technical lift. And so they're like, hey, engineering intern, why the heck not? And I just absolutely fell in love with it. And then I went on to get my MBA. I grew up my career, I guess what you would call marketing operations before it was really even called that. And then at some point I made the transition over into leading field and regional marketing. That expanded to a full EMEA marketing team. And then I left marketing entirely. And I cannot recommend that more. I loved the opportunity to learn from other sides of the business. I wanted to get more into general management. And so I moved over into corporate strategy where I was doing M&A work, and I was actually evaluating the go-to-market and commercial strategies of M&A targets, as well as advising the business leaders within those organizations. Very, very cool shift. And from there, I stumbled my way into leading a disruptive innovation product team. I knew nothing about product, but I knew a lot about leadership and what it took to lead through change. And that gave me a whole different perspective and another realm of business. And then after that, I found my way back into marketing, standing up and leading a marketing organization at Avanti. And then my next step was here, and I've been here at Flexera for about 9 months. And this is my first gig where I get to really lead all facets of marketing.
So what was it that excited you about the opportunity?
So Flexera is in such a crucial and interesting moment in its own evolution and in the context of the market. So the business had traditionally been one that sold to really large enterprise organizations. It was a highly complex sales cycle. It was mostly a direct motion. And the business made a couple of acquisitions to expand its market into the mid-market, which also opened up the doors to sell through the partner channel. And all of a sudden, there was a much more multifaceted way to go to market. This mix of, enterprise, highly precise, large deal cycles, complex products, but also simpler solutions to a more down-market type of audience, and then different go-to-market channels. And that is exactly where I play. That's very interesting to me. And simultaneous to that, the business was making a transition from being a point solution provider to a platform provider, and going head-to-head against some big boys out in the market like IBM and ServiceNow. So what marketing leader would not want to get their hands on that?
Absolutely, yes. So you enjoying it so far?
Yes, very much. It is just as interesting and dynamic and fast-paced as was promised.
Any surprises at all?
Oh, sure. There's always surprises. I think the biggest surprise for me was how big of a lift it was going to be, it's turned out to be to really change the mindset and the way that we work as an organization to be more multifaceted than this large enterprise direct, and while simultaneously making this shift from point solution to platform. Anybody who's been through this type of shift, oh, by the way, also migrating from on-premise to cloud, knows that there's a lot more to do there than you can even predict.
Yeah, we could probably spend a full hour just talking about how you get the right alignment for a big go-to-market shift like that. But that is not our topic at hand today. So let's dive into the topic. So we speak with marketing leaders quite a bit here at Nectar. And I think if you ask someone to give you like their perception on the efficiency of individual leads or MQLs, deep down they're going to tell you that they're not very happy with them. There's just so much spend that's wasted on them. But I don't want to lead the witness here. I'd love to get your view in terms of what do you think of MQLs in the world today? And do you think that they're effective in today's B2B marketing landscape?
Here's what I think about MQLs. I think we made too much of them. We did this to ourselves. We trained our business partners to evaluate marketing through the lens of an MQL, almost to our own detriment. And I do believe that the MQL, and I'm going to define that in just a second here because that matters. I do think the MQL plays a role, and you have to have a process for them. You can't just ignore them entirely. Right. And let me explain why. An MQL to me is somebody who asks for a sales meeting. It's that simple. I tighten that scope up so much that people's heads are still spinning. But it was one of the first changes that I made when I came to Flexera is I looked at what were we calling an MQL? What were we calling a lead and sending to our SDR organization? And the reality is it was kind of everything. It was the people who were the hand raisers and the people who scored and the people who breathed in our direction, and we felt that should be good enough. And the problem with that is that you cannot react quickly enough or with enough precision when you're bringing through that breadth of people. And so the SDRs lost focus, the conversion rates were really low. Even for the people who are hand raisers, because we weren't getting to them fast enough. We weren't spending enough time reacting to them in the right way. So we tightened it up and we said an MQL is somebody who requests a meeting, something that results in a sales meeting. They ask for a demo. They ask for a sales meeting. They want to talk to an expert. They want to book a meeting. All of those kind of calls to action that lead to that outcome is what we call an MQL. That's the only thing that we label that way. That doesn't mean that all the other people with whom we're interacting aren't important. That doesn't mean that they don't support our outbound motions. But there are two things that I needed the team to get comfortable with. Number one is it is that you don't have to call something an MQL for it to matter, right? Building a warm audience for outbound efforts is still a value add that marketing needs to bring. And we shouldn't be worrying about whether you're getting credit because you stamped it as an MQL. That's number one. Number two, there are audiences who make up your buying group who are going to be unknown to you, and you just got to get comfortable with that, because when we think about our buying group, there are the very few people who are going to stick their neck out and represent their company and be the people who are engaging and might submit the form, and then there's everybody else. And if you only focus on the people who are going to go to your website and fill in a form, you are missing out.
Yeah, 100%. I wholeheartedly agree. I had a podcast episode a few weeks ago with the folks over at Palo Alto Networks, and they're one of the big go-to-market transformation stories around buying groups, specific in the context of like how Forrester thinks about buying groups.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they talked about was MQLs are important, right? I think early on Forrester said like MQLs are dead, like they're being provocative. MQLs, to your point, have a place. I think what's equally important though is what's the swarming effect in terms of what's going on. Right?
Exactly.
And me being able to pass over those people who score up or don't score up, because it's what's more important, the signal of multiple people starting to engage, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So before we go to the next question, I just had a question about your thoughts on MQLs. How was it prior to you arriving at Flexera? Was there a different view, and did you have to change that perception?
Yes, there was. So the view that was in place before I joined was the combination of a scored lead and those hand raisers. So either of those scenarios could result in an MQL, and everything that was also a respondent to a marketing campaign, while it wasn't labeled an MQL, was also being pushed to SDRs for follow-up. So it almost didn't matter if somebody was an MQL or another type of lead. All of it was just being dumped on the SDRs to sort through and react to. And it was really that lack of prioritization that led to those challenges. And frankly, the people who were the respondents aren't necessarily the people you actually want to talk to, right? They might be a good representative and an indicator that there's something going on in that account. But what we want is we want the SDRs to look at those responses, look at the cumulative engagement that is occurring within an account, within an organization, and then make a smart choice as to how do I best approach the right people in this organization, while also responding immediately to the people who actually said, hey, I would like to talk to you. Okay, you asked? Absolutely, we'll talk to you. Yeah. I think I used to be a huge believer in the scoring concept. I remember I would stand up and do lead scoring education to this field and why you should believe in this and why you should trust these marketing leads. And what I've learned over time is scoring is a little bit too easy to fudge and throttle when you're not hitting your MQL number.
Yeah, 100%.
And that kind of defeats the purpose, right?
Yeah. So what kind of a lift was that in terms of change, like getting the right alignment in the organization?
Surprisingly, very easy.
Is that right?
It was, yes. And I'm not being glib because I don't believe that it will be easy for everybody. The reason it was easy for me is because I set that expectation before they hired me. As part of the interview process, I was like, listen, I want to talk to your RevOps leader. I want to talk to the people who know how things are working. And I want to explain my philosophy, because if you're not aligned to this philosophy, don't even hire me. Okay. Yeah. So for my business stakeholders, they just stepped back and let me do my thing. That was not hard. There was some technical work that had to be done, but the ops team understood the assignment and they put the work in as quickly as was reasonable. There was some discomfort, and there still is some. I'm not going to pretend like everybody in the marketing team are totally bought in and get it. There's absolutely some discomfort because many marketers who grew up particularly as performance marketers, they're used to holding on to that thing to be the thing that proves that what they're doing is working. Yeah. And my job as a leader is to tell them a different way, to say, metrics matter. Here are the metrics that matter and how we're going to set goals against that and measure them. And we do have goals against hand raisers. We are aiming to drive a certain number of hand raisers into the business, but it is by no means the exclusive litmus test for is marketing doing its job.
Yeah, it's not the end all be all metric. It's one of the things that you pay attention to, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And so when it comes to metrics and alignment, I think a lot of people pay lip service to we've got the right alignment, yet when you peel the onion back a little bit, they're still looking at marketing's contribution to pipeline. And so rather than driving qualified pipeline or driving revenue and having the clear alignment with sales, yep. How do you do that internally?
Well, that's like a whole nother seminar that I do. In our metrics that matter, we have a scorecard, and that scorecard is split into 3 tiers: strategic metrics, operational metrics, and tactical metrics. Strategic metrics are those that we align at the top line business level, and those metrics never fall below the line of pipeline. And they include, here are our bookings targets, here's marketing contribution to those bookings. Here are our pipeline targets, here's marketing contribution to that pipeline. Here are our win rate targets, and marketing carries this win rate. Those are our strategic targets. Boom, that's it in the revenue category. There are other strategic targets related to brand that we need to achieve for the business. We're trying to achieve certain magic quadrant placements, etc. But as it relates to revenue, that's it for strategic. That hand raiser target, that MQL target, actually falls below the line into an operational KPI. And we have other operational KPIs, including ABM KPIs, such as on a monthly basis, the number of accounts that we want to reach and engage through our marketing programs. And so when we set those strategic targets, we derive those directly from the business targets and had a conversation. We worked with revenue operations, we aligned with sales. Now, interestingly, in my tenure here, I've been here 9 months, about halfway through that time period, we got a new CRO. And some of that reset that I had started had to be reset again. And I had to have another direct conversation. I had to say, hey, look, I don't know what you're used to when it comes to working with a marketing leader. Just so you know, you're going to be sick of me. Like, we're going to be best friends. We're going to make these decisions together. If you start making decisions without me, I'm going to chase you down. And you should chase me down if I start doing things without you. So there's an expectation you have to set. And it takes time and practice and learning these business partners.
100%. Yeah. And I like your approach with like, let's have a healthy debate, conversation, and hold each other accountable because, again, going back to the alignment, that's just critical. And I think the strategic metrics is really, really important. And then breaking down the operational metrics is wonderful. Let's transition over to ABM now, because I think ABM has evolved so much over the past several years. How does account-based marketing, from your perspective, evolve from broad level targeting to more of a multi-stakeholder, holistic approach where you're moving from maybe a single product to a platform and there might be different buying groups, the account level might not be satisfied, the buying group motion. So what's your thoughts on that and maybe some key drivers behind that change?
So for a while, I just rejected the term ABM entirely because I just think it is how B2B business fundamentally works. And if you're not being intentional about the accounts, i.e. the companies you are targeting, you're probably doing B2B wrong. And not B2B marketing, B2B. The entire go-to-market motion needs to be aligned to a set of accounts. So I'm a little bit allergic to the word ABM for that reason, because it almost gives people the perception that it's a marketing strategy when in fact it's really a business strategy. However, with that said, let's agree that account-based marketing is marketing's a layer of accountability to an overall account-based strategy. And this transition from selling a point solution to selling a platform, especially when the buying groups of the individual point solutions that reside in that platform are very distinct, is very hard. And I am not going to pretend like I have cracked that nut. Here's what I can tell you. The easiest place to start is with what you know. So if you understand what is the ideal customer profile, what are the attributes that make up good target accounts for this point solution, and then you go express that same exercise against another point solution, and then you cross-reference those things, that will start to get you closer to, here are the accounts that are the best positioned to be a candidate for my platform approach, right? That's how I would start. That's how we are going about it. And then you take it a step further and you say, okay, when I'm looking at this point solution, who are the buyers? So actually, I look at it in three categories. I think, who are the users of the solution? So we sell software. So in some cases might be unique to software. There are the people who are actually using the software itself, hands-on keyboard. There are the people who are buying, making the buying decisions, who may or may not actually use the product. And then there are people who are influencing those decisions, who may or may not get deeply involved in the buying decision, right? So I think about those as three side-by-side circles, and those circles overlap, sometimes a little, sometimes a lot. And then you have to repeat that same exercise for the other point solution. And then you start to realize where there are similar buyers and where there are completely distinct ones. And then I like to think about the idea of the buyer jobs to be done. You mentioned Forrester. I think this one happens to be a Gartner construct. But if you think about what do people need to do to move through a buying cycle and how does that differ by those different personas, that starts to help you triangulate, okay, I need to create a marketing experience that reaches these people to serve this need. And these are the types of content they need to support that. These are the watering holes they're most likely in. This is how they're most likely to engage with me. And doing a callback to what we were talking about earlier, sometimes that level of engagement is not going to be something you can manage. So if you're thinking about your decision influencers, that might be a CFO. And sometimes an influencer might not be involved in the yes, but dang if they don't get in the way and say no, right? So you want to have a strategy for them. That strategy might be, hey, I'm going to position some thought leadership articles in CFO magazine, right? Okay, that's not going to lead to an MQL, I can tell you that, but it's important to do.
Yeah.
So that's how you start to map out all of the things that you need to do in service of the buying group, and be honest with yourselves and with your stakeholders. These are the members of the buying group. I'm going to be able to drop the breadcrumbs for you and show you this is what they are doing and measure that. And here are the ones that we're doing stuff. You're just going to have to trust that it's reaching them, because I can't show it to you in Salesforce.
Yeah. So you said a couple of things there that I want to unpack, because I think they're really insightful. Before I get to my question, when you think about segments, your enterprise buying group for one product compared to maybe what's considered commercial, considered SMB, those buying groups change as well.
Absolutely.
And so you have to think about, while the personas may be the same, the influence that they have in the decision are different by segment. How do you think about that today?
Yeah, you're totally right. When you're trying to sell a really robust platform with a multi-point solution offering to a very large organization, though the people who are ultimately the users of the product have almost no say in what happens to them, right? The decision is made and it's pushed down. Whereas downstream, it is very often the people who are using the thing that are also the decision makers, and those people tend to have a closer relationship to those decision influencers. You have to understand those differences and nuances, because the shift becomes in the buying job to be done that those people play. Yeah. That doesn't necessarily mean that you need to create completely different content. It's just a shift in who that content is presented to.
Right.
So I'm a big fan of operating at scale. And I think for a while, some people interpreted ABM to be almost the opposite of scale. Like it has to be one-to-one. I don't believe that. I actually think that you can absolutely scale an account-based experience, just like you can scale an experience that feels personal to an individual human. We were able to do that with technology even before AI, and AI is just unlocking that capability even more.
Yeah. The second thing I wanted to dig in is, as you think about those jobs to be done and the influence that they're having as part of that buying decision, how do you mine that data to get to that level of insight? Most organizations, when I ask them, in particular in enterprise, but it does apply across all segments, hey, if you were to go to an opportunity in Salesforce today, how many people are on that opportunity? And it would astound you how many of them have one person on them, right? Because reps don't take the time to update it themselves. It might be siloed in different pieces of sales tech. But a marketer wants to know who's influencing the decision, and the data is typically not there. So I'm curious, in order to get to that level of granularity and understanding, was that also something that you faced as well, or was it an easy way to mine that data?
So I'm going to answer this question in a very marketer type of way, which is that good research is multifaceted. So yes, you want to mine the data and get quantitative insight, but you also just have to do the work, the qualitative research and work, and go have a whole bunch of conversations with a whole bunch of people. And I find it's very important to have that conversation with a mix of sellers, with partners, and with the customers themselves to actually triangulate what you see, because the data doesn't tell the whole story for the reason you just said, but also because you are still operating under the bias and interpretation of who a seller perceives are important to add to that opportunity. With that being said, the attaching the people to the opportunity, there's research to understand so you can design good marketing, and then there's research so that you can monitor and validate, and the data layer has to be in place.
Yeah. So I think what you said there is critically important, which is the right technology infrastructure to be able to connect the people to the opportunities. That's the critical piece that I think a lot of companies have to solve for in order to have the data driven. But
that's right.
Also, and I come from a market research background, the quant-qual thing is so important as well. You need to go validate that. Hey, this is what we're seeing. Is this what you're seeing? What's not in the data? What are the stories that be around that? Critically important. The other thing I wanted to dig down in, and you mentioned this before about the CFO, so CFO magazine, it reminded me of a post that you made a couple of weeks ago. So one thing that you mentioned about needing to put the right advertisement in front of the right persona doesn't necessarily drive the meeting, but is critically important. And it reminds me of a post that you made a couple of weeks ago, which is thinking about demand capture versus demand generation. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your intent behind that post and why that's so important.
Sure. So most people are familiar with the 95-5 rule at this point. This idea that only 5% of your TAM, your target market, are going to be in market for what you have to offer at any given time. And there's this whole philosophical debate between, is marketing's job to go after it all or to go after that 5%? And the answer to that question is absolutely both. Your TAM, your target account audience that you're going after, are your target accounts for a reason, and it's marketing's job to stay in front of them. But the way that you need to approach those is completely different. When somebody is in market, they all know they have a problem. They are proactively seeking to solve it. And so the job to be done moment, that they're in solve problem mode, right? Yep. And you need to be showing up right exactly where they are in front of the right people going, here you go, let me show you how we can solve this problem for you. And you need to be capturing that demand. And frankly, if you're not really freaking good at that as a marketing team, you have no business trying to generate demand. Because generating demand means you need to make people aware both that they have a problem and that they should be acting to solve that problem. And that takes longer, it's harder to do, and it's harder and longer. Good marketing teams absolutely do both. And my commitment to our sales organization is, I don't want you worrying about all your target accounts that are not in market. Trust that we got you covered. We've got the air cover. We're educating. We're staying in front of them, but we're not pushing them, right? Everything we do should have a frictionless path to being able to raise their hand. They might be in market and we misread the signals, but we're not pushing, we're educating, we're there, we're in front. But yep. Man, when we know that an account is in market, let the swarming begin. And yep. We need to be swarming all the right people within that account. Marketing needs to do it, SDRs need to do it, the sellers need to do it. If you're really good, you tell your partners so that they do it. That's the difference.
Yeah. The question I have next is related to what you just talked about, which is SDRs. Do SDRs report up through marketing organization, or do they report up through sales?
Currently, they technically report into our revenue operations organization. However, we have kind of a matrix structure here, and so the head of the SDR team sits in my leadership team. We have regular meetings. We actually share the same reporting construct. So, we work very, very closely with SDRs, and I did actually lead a very large SDR team in my former organization, so I've spent a lot of time with SDRs.
Okay, so the reason why I asked that question is related to what you talked about, which is the 5% that aren't in market, where we want to educate them, we want to bring them along on challenges they might not have thought about yet, adding value. And I think SDR organizations over the past couple of years have taken this hard outbound approach of just trying to get that meeting and we're in a period now what I would call the great ignore, which is the misuse of the sales engagement platforms and AI solutions have just added more noise, and people are just applying their mentor spam filter and saying, not relevant, not relevant. So I'm curious, in the spirit of trying to not capture demand, but generate demand, has that evolved how you think about the work that the SDRs do? I'm sure they're still comped on meetings, but how might they help meet buyers where they are to provide that value in that education? Or is that really not their remit and it's more, that's a brand thing and it's a marketing thing and their job is still to go find those meetings?
So number one top priority is to swarm the 5% that are in market. Like their job is to capture that demand. Absolutely, that is your focus. But if you have the time, if they have the capacity, we also want them to be performing more strategic activities that lay the groundwork for a longer term future engagement when somebody is in market. I will give you an example of that. Because we are making this shift from point solutions to platform, the level of audience that we want to reach and influence is expanded to executive audiences. These are not people whom we have established relationships with. And if you only wait till those people are in market to be in front of them, it's really hard to shift their mind, especially because experienced executives typically have experience solving the problem in a way that they know, right? So you want to try to shape and influence their mindset around how they might solve a future problem. And it's very hard to have SDRs just do straight up cold calling to executive audiences, right? Like having an SDR talk to an executive will always be like, ooh, how do we make this work? So what we are about to try, actually, and you'll probably recognize this playbook, is we have identified a kind of series of controversial topics that kind of exist in our market space that we play in. And we are having the SDRs who have the time and capacity conduct research against their target accounts to see if there are executives within those accounts that are demonstrating an interesting perspective. Yep. And then we're inviting them to do like a video fireside chat with us. And so we're kind of planting the seed, we're establishing the relationship. We're not trying to sell them anything, but it's a door opener for an SDR to start to have that conversation with them. And the other kind of benefit is that it's kind of like an indirect way to have a discovery call, right? Because you start to understand what's going on in that business, which then you could feed that insight to the account rep, and then they can feed that into their own account development strategy.
Yeah.
Probably sounds a little familiar.
Yeah, absolutely it does. So I wanted to ask you a question, and I don't think this is the way that you think about this. So a lot of people, when they hear ABM, they think about, oh, we just have to listen for signals and look for the intent. And it's so much more than that, right? I guess the question is, when you think about, though, those folks that are shedding signal, whether that be visiting the website or downloading content, it's packaging, right? It's packaging those right signals. So it's not noisy to the reps. It's actually insightful to the reps. Because I don't think reps want more leads. They want better quality leads, right?
Exactly.
Are there certain types of signals or intent that you package together that you think have a higher propensity other than just like anything you can capture?
So taking a multi-signal approach where you're looking at their first-party interaction with you, the second-party interaction, and third-party interaction, I know that's a common construct, but I will emphasize the importance of that construct, because you can go by a purely third-party intent signals, but if that's not being consumed in context of how is that organization interacting with you, you're going to miss something. So there's the signal aspect. In terms of how do we know which signals, I mean, we're Sixth Sense users, and I'm a big fan of Sixth Sense. And what I love about it, people love to talk about intent signals, but actually what I think matters more is the predictive analytics aspect. Machine learning that actually is able to run large-scale regression analysis to interpret what types of first, second, and third-party signals have repeatedly been indicators of successful purchases, and marrying that with the firmographic attributes of an organization, their fit, to triangulate how likely that is to be beneficial. Like, just talking intent signals without any of that other context is indeed just noise. But I'm going to take that a step further for you and say, and perhaps this is a little bit controversial, I don't give the intent signal data to sales.
You give it to the SDRs only?
We only give it to the SDRs. We kind of position this as the SDR superpower. We teach them how to spend time researching and interpreting and looking for the broader context to interpret it. And by the way, this takes time to educate anybody on, including SDRs, but sellers have so much going on that very few are going to be spending their time doing that. Maybe if you have like a real, like, true hunting organization, they can learn how to do it, but you got to have a lot of confidence in your predictive model as well, and that takes time to develop, and good quality data, by the way. However, what we do is we feed the Sixth Sense scoring into a more complete propensity model that we have developed separately, so that it's an attribute that we're feeding in to the account teams. And that is something that we're saying, we're not telling you spend your time here versus there. You can go have a conversation with your SDR and do that. What we're telling you is these are insights that you should be considering in your account plan. Yeah. I think, whether it's controversial or not, I think it's split. Like, a lot of companies are doing precisely how you're doing it. Others are feeding it to sales because they feel the AE is a little bit more seasoned in their career. They've got a little bit more business acumen. They know how to translate that into the business context. Where, I'm not saying SDRs can't do it, but they tend to be a little bit younger in their career, and that acumen's not quite there. But I think what you mentioned is very important. You've got to provide the right enablement to them to help them with that synthesis and analysis. And I think that it totally depends on the type of business, the type of rep, the go-to-market motion. I'm much more inclined, like, if the strategic accounts team came to me, and these strategic account reps, they have 50 accounts or less, right? If they're really spending all of their time just really strategizing how to go deep into a strategic account, giving them a tool like this in their toolkit once they learn how to use it, sure. If it's a rep that's just doing high volume, like higher volume down market stuff, just giving them kind of like a signal that's feeding a prioritized attack list is probably good enough.
Yeah, I agree. Next question I have with you, we start talking a little bit about AI and predictive analytics. So I would love to get your take in terms of what the AI capabilities, where they are today, how you're leveraging them internally, and then what are you excited about? Where do you think it's going to go if we have this conversation a year from now? Where do you think the next opportunities lie?
Yeah, so I think about AI across three vectors. There's AI used by marketers to become more productive, effective marketers. There's the way that we need to position and message AI in the way that we support our customers' outcomes, right? As a software provider, we need to do that. And then the third vector is how AI fundamentally changes the way that our buyers behave and therefore how we need to execute our own marketing activity to enable that buying behavior. When you talk about buyer jobs to be done, there's also how are they doing those jobs? And dang, are they not shifting to AI like so fast your head's spinning, right? So those are the three vectors that I think about. And when it comes to the first, which is, I'll talk about the first and the third because I don't think people so much care about the second. But when it comes to how marketers are using AI, the world has changed and will never go back as far as I'm concerned. My level of patience for how long it's going to take to produce a piece of content, for example, has gone from it's going to take us a month to I want it tomorrow, right? Because generative AI has allowed us to do that. And we're using tools like Writer AI. There's so many AI. There's some tools that are just inherently AI tools like Writer. But then there's lots and lots of tools that are just being increasingly enhanced and improved by AI capabilities. And I'm interested in both of those. I expect both of those things, frankly. I think what makes people uncomfortable is that AI can do things better than us, and AI absolutely can do more things better than us. The example that I give is I don't want people feeling offended because I'm using Writer to write copy instead of a copywriter. But if I can train an agent to say, every time I'm going to run a webinar, there's a standard bill of materials and it just spits out all of these things. We give it the inputs and it spits out all of these outputs. And it's going to optimize them for all of these factors that it would take humans time and energy to go research. Good. Excellent. Give me that, right? And the marketers should be excited for that too. When it comes to the other side of the fence, which is about how we are optimizing our own marketing experiences in response to how people are using AI, I mean, every single marketer and marketing leader are like haunted by this right now. We all saw the massive decline in organic traffic. We're all trying to figure out how do we make sure that our information about our company is accessible by the LLMs and that we're being served up in the chat GPTs, and we're looking at, chat GPT gives a higher weight to completely different stuff than Gemini does. I don't have any more of a secret sauce than anybody else does. I'm following the same stuff that's being published and we're iterating as fast as we possibly can. I will say we saw a 65% decline in organic web traffic in Q4 alone last year. We implemented a whole bunch of changes as quickly as possible in Q1 and we've recovered 75% of that traffic. And we've basically managed to maintain a flat inbound lead volume, that hand raiser volume, which means that the people who are making the decisions that I'm far enough along in this process to talk to sales are still coming to our website and saying, I want to talk to them. So I view that as good. Getting to flat is a hard thing to be excited about when I want to grow and my business is growing, but I got to find other sources, other ways to pull people through their journey because just trying to course correct and backfill the way it used to be is a fool's errand.
Yeah, 100%. We're having such a rich discussion. I can't believe we're already 45 minutes in. So let's transition to our lightning round, which is a little bit more lighthearted and personal. And I'm going to prioritize a couple of questions here in the interest of time. I'm going to ask you one of my favorites, and no pun intended. If you think about your role, whether it be a Flexera or previous, what's your favorite part about being the head of marketing?
I love solving interesting problems and leading people through change, and marketing seems to be very frequently, and especially right now, the tip of the spear when it comes to interesting problems and change, particularly with AI. You could apply this in really to any function, any job, but marketing is at the epicenter of it right now.
Yeah. Now, there's always going to be a flip side to that question, which is what's your least favorite, or asked a different way, what's really hard about your job?
What's hard about my job, I hate having to say no. My preference is always to finding a path to yes. And sometimes the things that I'm asked to do are so redonkulous, there's no path to yes. Like, I have to say no. And I hate that. I hate it when people bring stuff to me that it's like so ill-conceived that I have to say no.
Yeah, I agree. It's like there's only so much you can do, but it's also got to be reasonable. It's got to be something that's worth spending time on. What about if somebody that's a little bit younger in their career? Maybe they're a demand gen analyst, or maybe they're got their first role in ABM. What advice might you give them in terms of wanting to maybe have your job someday?
I would say challenge yourself to learn something you don't know that is outside of your comfort zone. I think the best thing that you can do as an aspiring leader is to understand a business from a completely different perspective than the job that you've been doing. Yep. So it's not just about getting deeper and being, at some point, being the best subject matter expert ceases to matter as much as being a really well-rounded leader who understands a broader context.
Yeah. Great advice. So, completely personal random question. So when you're not focused on work, what do you like to do on your spare time?
So I write recipes, actually. So I cook, I bake, so I do cooking recipes, baking recipes, and cocktail recipes.
Really? What's your favorite thing you've made recently?
So I'm always tinkering with things, but I think recently my favorite is an evolution on a Spanish rice, which I know sounds really boring, but I was trying to figure out, like, how do I just power pack this thing with protein and vegetables, because it's a comfort food I enjoy, and I wanted to elevate it to be something that's both wicked delicious and healthy, and so that's my most recent one.
Excellent. What's been your favorite place to travel?
Ooh, okay. I've done a lot of travel. I went to Morocco this year for the first time, and that was super duper cool. But I would say my favorite place ever so far is the south of France, right on the Mediterranean Sea. I absolutely adore it. I was in a tiny little village called Agda that nobody's ever heard of, and it was just so quiet and slow-paced and friendly, and the sea was gorgeous, and I could bring my dog onto the beach and do yoga every morning. I love that.
It sounds amazing. What's on the bucket list? Where would you like to go?
I would love to go to Japan. It's a place I've not been yet, and I hear amazing things about it. It's also almost as culturally different from American culture as you can get, and I would just love to experience it.
Yeah, that's on my bucket list as well. All right, so last question before we wrap up. What have I not asked you about that maybe I should have in the context of ABM or account-based, right, that you'd like to pass on to the audience as parting thoughts?
So I think that one of the things that sometimes gets forgotten when you talk about ABM is that at the end of the day, you are actually marketing to humans. Yeah. So we choose the accounts we're going after because of the firmographic attributes or situational stuff with an account, like they're going through a merger and acquisition, or they're in a highly regulated industry. Those things matter, but you need to take the time to think about, but what does that mean for the humans who are experiencing it and the problem that you're helping them solve? So if, a target account for you is a highly regulated industry, what does that mean for the people? It might mean that they are trying to avoid a very serious consequence and a personal headache or fire drill if they find themselves into regulatory hot water, right? Or if they're going through a merger and acquisition, for those of us who have been through it, and many of us have, that can be really challenging and painful and scary. So how do you position what you can offer them and to speak to the human and the emotional side of things as well?
What great advice to part on. So listen, Leslie, I really enjoyed this conversation. Very insightful. I appreciate your time, your insights, and your wisdom. So next time I am either your way or maybe at the Breakthrough Conference later this year, if you'll be attending, would love to grab a drink.
You know what? I'm in Chicago all the time, so we definitely should.
Yeah, let me know. All right, great. Well, that's another episode of the Revenue Lounge. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Take care.